Assalamu alaikum, guys. Hope everyone is doing well. So, in this video, I want to talk about Neil deGrasse Tyson. I've been watching some of his things, or his interviews, his podcasts recently in relation to the whole UFO, UAP topic. And it's been very interesting for me to see some of these scientists, and there are different camps, or you can put some of these scientists into these scientists that are involved in the whole UFO UAP discussion into different groups. Neil deGrasse Tyson and a few others you can say fall into the materialist or naturalist camp. They were also, vocal proponents of atheism a few years ago. And it's very interesting to see them start to speak about such a topic. Now, we're going to discuss his perspective, how he seems to be shifting gears as time goes by in this topic. And I also want to share some thoughts in regards to what's happening right now as far as narratives are concerned and the way these narratives are being formed in regards to this phenomena, and how I believe that there is an element of this which is to keep away a religious perspective in this discussion. But before we get into this topic today, drop a like, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. It helps to get this message out to more people. As far as I'm aware from the analytics, probably close to 40% of viewers haven't yet subscribed. So please take a moment, doesn't cost anything, just click the subscribe button and it helps us push this content further. So Neil deGrasse Tyson, initially 4, 5, 6 years ago, when after 2017 the topic starts to pick up, individuals like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who love to or seem to love to comment on various different topics, even if they don't specialize in those areas, in some cases against religion, etc. And obviously he is not a theologian, he is not a student of religious studies or anything like that, but nevertheless, people like him and others such as Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, so on, the four horsemen of atheism, and by extension people like Neil deGrasse Tyson would love to comment on such topics without having any substantial insights into these areas. But nevertheless, they started to now, at least, Sam Harris spoke about the UFO topic a while back. He hasn't done so recently, but Neil deGrasse Tyson has been making a lot of noise, and he's been talking a lot on the topic of UFOs, aliens, NHI, etc. He's even published a book now on aliens, which is very interesting. Now, why is this happening? The very first thing I think that's going on here is that there is so much interest in this topic, which is only increasing by the day, that these individuals who ascribe to naturalism are hypercritical when it comes to anything that lies outside the domain of science. They can't help but now start to comment on this topic. There is just too much out there, too much discussion, too much discourse, too many conversations that are taking place on social media, online, that it cannot be ignored. So they have to chime in, they have to weigh in, they have to share their perspective. So we see Neil deGrasse Tyson doing the very same thing, and his views seem to be evolving. Initially, again, he was very skeptical of the whole thing, still is to some degree, but now he seems to be acknowledging, well, there's something really out there that's going on. We can't deny that. But what he's doing now is he seems to be wanting to suggest or push a particular narrative on these things. He's obviously favoring the ETI, the extraterrestrial hypotheses. I don't think he's even entertaining anything else. However, the ETI, as you've seen from this channel, the discussions I've had with some of these experts, and some of our own analysis we've done on the live streams, the Signs and Shadows show, the ETI, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, is actually one of the weakest hypotheses on the table currently. So why would people like Neil deGrasse Tyson want to push this hypothesis, emphasize this hypothesis, focus in on this hypothesis? Well, one simple reason is because the ETI hypothesis, as I mentioned before, is more in line with their worldview. It's more in line with materialism. It's more in line with naturalism. It fits easily. Because when you talk about extraterrestrial intelligences from out there in the universe, you're still talking about biological, physical beings that exist somewhere within our physical universe. And there's no problem with this type of idea per se from a naturalist or a materialist or an atheist perspective. But I think what individuals like Tyson are ignoring or overlooking currently is that when you weigh out ETI in relation specifically to the phenomena, now there's something that needs to be clarified here. We're not saying that the idea of extraterrestrial intelligences is absurd, generally speaking. No, it could very well be the case that there are beings out there that Allah, God, has created and scattered throughout the heavens and the earth, as the Quran mentions, etc. We don't have a problem with this from a theological perspective. It very well could be a reality that there are beings, creation out there in the universe that we're not aware of. Aliens, as we would refer to them today. So there's no issue with generally the idea of ETI or this idea of extraterrestrial life out there in the universe. However, when I say that the ETI hypothesis is weak, what we're saying is that it's weak in relation to the phenomena that people are talking about today. What's being observed today, that in relation to that, the ETI hypothesis is extremely weak. And we outlined that in our last live stream. I'll link that live under this video so you guys can go see, where we weigh out all of the popular hypotheses and we rate them according to the evidence that they have and their strengths and weaknesses, etc. But nevertheless, it may be the case that Neil deGrasse Tyson has not yet looked at the other hypotheses or has not yet evaluated the ETI hypothesis in relation to the phenomena. Hence, he's still pushing the ETI, or that he has to some degree, but because he recognizes that ETI hypothesis is probably the only hypothesis which is really in line with his worldview, his disposition, his position, his naturalism, his materialism. Therefore, he is focusing in on that. And if that's the case, well, sooner or later, he's going to realize the flaws of this proposal, this hypothesis, and he's going to have to shift gears again. I've also noticed it's been quite frustrating for some of the ufologists and people that follow this topic online. What Neil deGrasse Tyson has been quite frustrating to these people because of his flip-flopping, going from one idea to another idea and changing gears and then writing a book, and almost as if he's trying to capitalize on this whole situation. But that's a whole different discussion in and of itself. Going back to the point, I think this very, very interesting, guys, to see even the naturalists and materialists and atheists talking about this topic now. It just shows how popular this topic is becoming. It just shows the times that we live in today. That the world is changing very quickly and people's beliefs are shifting very quickly. What people are into, the new age, is gaining a lot of traction very quickly, especially online. And what was considered to be crazy or absurd or madness just a few years ago is now being accepted as the norm. So it's interesting to see people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, atheists, naturalists, who are now talking about aliens and UFOs publicly, writing books on the topic. And this is why I keep saying, yes, there is the whole question of ontological shock. And a lot has been said about how would world religions deal with disclosure and the idea that we're not alone in the universe and there is another intelligence, and how this will affect people in a negative way and shake the foundations of their faith. When in reality, I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact on world religions, especially when you look at it from the outside of the Western world. When you study other traditions and religions, you see that they already have built within their traditions and their systems of belief ideas about non-human intelligences that are not human and that are not divine, but lie somewhere in between. So it's not going to be a shock for them. They are easily going to be able to interpret and understand this phenomena. Even from an Islamic perspective, as we go into in a lot of detail on this channel, it's not an issue at all. We can entertain the ET hypothesis, no problem, because there's scope within the text to account for that understanding. But also we can interpret these entities or this phenomena as the jinn. And like I've said, and like we've said, and you guys are probably aware that if you look at the evidence at hand, the testimonies, the accounts, etc., it seems like in this case, we are dealing with the jinn, most likely. Those that really are going to be affected, I believe, or maybe not individuals, but the worldview that's really going to be affected or impacted is going to be the secular, materialist, naturalist, atheist perspectives, because people in the modern world have been led to believe that, all there is in existence is physical and material, and there's nothing beyond the physical material world. This worldview has also impacted metaphysics to a great extent. There is no real coherent understanding of reality, and things that lay beyond the physical material world and how they connect to the physical material world. There's no understanding of these things. It's going to be a shock to these individuals, those that ascribe to these worldviews, when there is an introduction of a non-human intelligence that has a spiritual aspect to it, an unseen aspect to it, a paranormal aspect to it. That's what's going to be shocking to people, and it already is. And I think maybe people like Neil deGrasse Tyson on some level realize this, and therefore are trying to cater for that type of audience. I don't know, maybe that also is the case. Now, another thing that's been happening, which I think I want to make a note of here, is that the idea of the jinn is being spoken about more and more. More secular academics and individuals are mentioning the jinn. Borland, I believe, on his recent podcast on Jesse Michael's channel, mentions the jinn, and he's mentioned them before. He is one of the whistleblowers. We've had Valet allude to this in some of his books, and also mention this in a podcast online. And then if you go further back in history, Gordon Crichton, Rosemary Ellen Gully, and those are individuals that specifically have mentioned the jinn. But then you have others who have not specifically mentioned the jinn, but have come to the conclusion that these entities or beings are not biological physical creatures from another planet, but are entities which have been spoken about and described in other religions, and they occupy a different space, and they may not fully be material or physical, as we understand material and physical things to be, and they may be spiritual in some sense. But now I'm noticing that there are more people talking about the jinn online in relation to this phenomena. And what's also happening at the same time is that I'm also noticing that people are now starting to categorize and say, oh, look, yeah, you can call them the jinn, but then there's, we have other entities and beings in other traditions and cultures, and many world religions and cultures have spoken about these entities throughout history. So people are making links, although they're moving away from ETI, they are making links to what world traditions and world religions have been saying about these non-human intelligences. But they seem to put the jinn into the same category. Some do, at least. But I think what's very unique, and this needs to be highlighted, what's very unique about the Islamic position in regards to non-human intelligences is that it gives us a very coherent framework. It provides a taxonomy. It provides a model. When in the Islamic tradition, the jinn are mentioned, they're not only as mentioned as, entities, and we don't only have reports from people having experiences with these entities. Within the Quran, within the prophetic traditions, there is so much information about these entities, their origins, what they're created from, what their objectives are, why their objectives are what they are, their relation or the dynamic between humans and jinn, what they can do, what their abilities are, everything, the different types of jinn, everything there is covered. Everything is mentioned in so much detail. A comprehensive model is built in regards to the jinn, or in modern terms, non-human intelligences, that you cannot compare what Islam provides in regards to this phenomena to any other traditional religion. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a Muslim, etc. Alhamdulillah, that is the case. But I'm saying this because this is fact. I have looked at many world traditions and religions in regards to what they say about non-human beings or entities. You would be hard pressed to find something that comes close to what Islam provides as far as a model and a taxonomy in regards to these entities and beings. And this is something that, again, non-Muslim academics are also recognizing. I had, if you guys haven't already, check out my recent podcast with Dr. Brenda Densler, she outlines this very point too. And this is something, if you're very objective, this is something that needs to be recognized and appreciated. And at the very least, as I've said many times, if you even approach the Islamic tradition from a purely historical perspective, you will be enlightened as far as how much information there is about these entities and beings, and how that will enrich the discussion on the phenomena itself. So I think it's important, the key point here being, I think it's important that as these supernatural beings and entities are spoken about more, and as more links have been drawn between the phenomena and what humanity has been saying for a very long time, at the same time people are just putting all of this into one basket. I want to highlight that at least what the Islamic world provides, what the texts provide, is far more comprehensive than what you would find in any other tradition. And that distinction needs to be made. And I encourage people, as we always do, if you haven't already, look at what the Quran and the Hadith, the prophetic sayings, have to say in regards to these beings, these entities, these non-human intelligences. And you'll see, read the paper or the article that I published a while back, a few years ago, the jinn hypothesis. Look at the points of contact. The Islam doesn't only mention an entity or a being that's non-human or a non-human intelligence, but it's mentioned or highlighted a being which I have argued in the article is identical to what's being observed, or these entities that are being observed today. And there's 4 key areas of points of contact that I outline in that article. If you pick up the jinn hypothesis booklet, in that Farouk McDermott, in the second part, outlines half a dozen other points of contact: the link to water, telepathy, shape-shifting, deception, abduction, and the list goes on. The jinn are all of these characteristics that we notice about the phenomena today are also true of the jinn. And therefore I conclude that, well, if it swims like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it probably is a duck. If it flies like a jinn and it shapeshifts like a jinn, then it probably is a jinn. But that's for you, that I'm just putting out data, I'm putting out information, I'm providing the evidence and the argumentation. We're presenting it in a robust way. Through abductive reasoning, we're showing the points of contact, and we're inferring to the best explanation. Now it's up to you, it's up to the individual to see what they want to do with that information, etc. But I just wanted to highlight these points. I thought it's very interesting how the materialist camp, the atheist camp, the naturalist camp is also weighing in now on the UFO topic, the approach they're taking, the perspectives they're favoring, even though they seem to be against what the evidence and data suggests. Nevertheless, it's very interesting. And also how people are now starting to talk about the jinn. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What you think, or as far as what's going on in the whole sphere and in these discussions. And I think, at the very least, I know we're focusing in on a very niche, specific topic, and we have been doing for a while. But I think what it highlights is the greater shift that's taking place within society and the zeitgeist, and it's intriguing. And I think there's some very interesting things to come. Things seems to be escalating. Only a few years ago, guys, such ideas, the talk of such entities and beings was ridiculed and seen as absurd and ridiculous. And materialism was dominating, naturalism was dominating, and now the tables are turning. It's like I always say, it's interesting times. But anyway, I'll leave you guys with that. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum.